She used to come out for senior high fellowship, but then she started to see this older boy out of high school. Mildred hesitated for a moment, gathered her courage, and let the rest of the story tumble out fearlessly. Then she got pregnant and decided to keep the baby. And she wants to have it baptized here in her own church. But she's nervous to come and talk to you, Reverend. She named the baby James, she said. Jimmy. When the matter came up at the board meeting, there was a moot question or two about why in the world Tina Corey was keeping the baby. I had started to explain what everybody already knew, that Tina was a member of the church, an unwed mother, and that I didn't know who the father was. They all knew who the father was, of course. This is a small town. The father was young Jimmy Hawthorne, who had recently chosen a career in his nation's armed forces and was now completing his basic training at Fort Bragg. The real problem, however, was the picture of the baptism that we all had in our heads. Tina, pimples on her chin, little Jimmy in his arms, big John, long fled to North Carolina, and Mildred Corey, the only one who would stand when the question was asked, as was the custom in this small town church, who stands with this child? It hurt to think about it. And they approved the baptism, of course. The church was full, as it always is on the Sunday before Christmas. After the sermon, the assisting elder stood beside me at the baptismal font and thundered, "Tina Corey presents her son for baptism." Down the aisle she came nervously, briskly, smiling at me, only shaking slightly, and month-old Jimmy in her arms, a blue pacifier stuck in his mouth. The scene hurt, all right, every bit as much as we all knew it would. So young this mother was, and so alone. One could not help but remember another baby born a long time ago to a young and unwed mother in difficult circumstances. I read the opening part of the service, noting Mildred Corey sitting strangely out of place in a front pew, and then I asked, "Who stands with this child?" I nodded at Mildred slightly to coax her to her feet. She rose slowly, looking to either side, and then returned my smile. My eyes went back to the service book when I became aware of the movement in the pews. A couple of elders stood up, and then the 6th grade Sunday school teacher stood up, and then a new young couple in church stood. And before my incredulous eyes, the whole church was standing up with little Jimmy. Tina was crying, of course, and Mildred Corey was holding onto the pew in front of her as though she was standing on the deck of a rolling ship in a great wind, which, in a way, she was. I don't know if you get the vision of that story, but they have this tradition where a child is brought, they're holding the child, who stands? And, the family members stand, and she had no family member except the one mother, and everybody in the church stands up. Pretty powerful. It's risky though, isn't it? I think it's risky to risk that vulnerable thing. I was a part of a church in Ohio in the mid-90s, and something quite the contrary happened there. A woman who was a deacon in the church for 20 years said, "My son is home on leave, and we want to have his baby baptized here next Sunday." She told this to me. And I said, why does he want to have the child baptized? And she said, well, because that's what we do. Our family has been a long-time member of this church. We deserve this, right? And I said, well, is he going to live around here? Because when we baptize, we promise to raise the child in the Christian faith. Why doesn't he have the child baptized where he's going to live? And she said, no, this is his family church. And I said, well, I guess I have a hard time with that because, it seems like you're saying you deserve to have this baby baptized. And the next thing I knew, the child was being baptized on an aircraft carrier off the coast of North Carolina. And it was in the headlines of the paper. What do you think? Was I wrong in saying, I have to think about that? It was a big deal. The church was upset. What is this about? Is this about us saying to each other, we deserve this? Or is it about something else, something more humble? I'd be interested to hear. Let's pray. Gracious